I'm Susie, 28 years old, and I'm standing in a courtroom facing two strangers who claim to be my parents. The same people who abandoned me at JFK Airport when I was 5 are now suing me for $5.5 million. They left me crying by a gift shop 23 years ago, promising they'd be right back from the bathroom. They never returned. Now they want the inheritance my adoptive father left me, claiming I was never truly abandoned. Before I share what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. If you've ever dealt with family betrayal, or know someone who has, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience. This journey taught me that sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the greatest blessings, and I think you'll understand why by the end. 23 years ago, I was just another excited 5-year-old at JFK Airport clutching my stuffed rabbit while my parents Rachel and Dennis checked our bags for what they said was a vacation to Disney World. I remember my mother's red lipstick and how she kept checking her watch. My father paced near the windows making phone call after phone call. When we reached security, they told me to wait by the gift shop. "Mommy needs to use the bathroom, sweetie," Rachel said, kissing my forehead. "Count the airplanes until we come back." I counted 73 airplanes before airport security found me. Officer James Wheeler was the one who approached me first. His kind eyes reminded me of my grandfather, and he knelt down to my level. "Hey there, where are your parents?" I told him about the bathroom, about counting planes, about my stuffed rabbit named Mr. Hoppy. He waited with me for an hour before calling it in. The security footage would later show my parents walking straight through security and boarding a flight to Mexico City. They'd used fake names on their tickets. The ones they gave airport staff led nowhere. Child Protective Services arrived as the sun set. A woman with gray hair and tired eyes wrapped me in a scratchy blanket and led me to a van. My few belongings, a change of clothes, Mr. Hoppy, and a coloring book fit in a single plastic bag. Later, investigators would find a note in my backpack, hastily scrawled in my mother's handwriting. "Financial hardship. Can't provide proper life. Please find good home." Those 11 words were supposed to justify leaving a 5-year-old alone in one of the busiest airports in the world. The first foster home smelled like cigarettes and cat litter. The Millers had 4 other foster kids and made it clear we were there for the monthly checks. I learned quickly to stay quiet and invisible. 6 months later, I was moved to the Davidsons, where Mrs. Davidson locked the refrigerator at night and made us ask permission to use the bathroom. The Johnsons came third, and for a brief moment, I thought I'd found my forever home. They talked about adoption, took me to soccer practice, even hung my drawings on their refrigerator. Then Mrs. Johnson got pregnant, and suddenly there wasn't room for a damaged foster kid anymore. Mrs. Klein, my social worker, seemed to take pleasure in my disappointments. "Don't get your hopes up," she'd tell me before each placement. "Kids with abandonment issues rarely get adopted. Too much baggage." She said it like I was a suitcase left at baggage claims, circling endlessly on the carousel with no one to pick me up. Foster home number 4 was the Washingtons, where I shared a room with 3 other girls and learned to hide my few possessions under my mattress. Number 5, the Garcias, lasted only 2 months before Mr. Garcia's job transferred them out of state, and I wasn't part of their moving plans. By the time I reached foster home number 6, the Brennans, I had stopped unpacking my plastic bag. What was the point? I was 7 now, old in foster care years, with a file thick with notes about my trust issues and difficulty bonding. That's when Grace and Robert Hartman walked into my life. They were visiting the Brennans' church when they met me sitting alone in the back pew, coloring in my worn book. Grace sat beside me and admired my purple sky. "Sometimes the sky feels purple," she said, and something in my chest unclenched. The Hartmans weren't looking to adopt. They'd tried for biological children for years before accepting their fate. But Grace couldn't forget the little girl with the purple sky, and she dragged Robert back the next Sunday, then the next. When they asked about adoption, Mrs. Klein tried to discourage them. "She's been through 6 homes," she warned. "Severe abandonment trauma, acting out, bedwetting, night terrors. You seem like nice people. There are easier children." But Grace saw through the warnings to the scared little girl underneath. "We don't want easy," she told Mrs. Klein. "We want Susie." The adoption process took 8 months. 8 months of supervised visits, home studies, and court hearings. 8 months of Mrs. Klein's skeptical reports and warnings about my behavioral challenges. But Grace and Robert never wavered. The day the judge finalized my adoption, I wore a new purple dress Grace had bought me. When he banged his gavel and declared me officially Susie Hartman, I burst into tears. For the first time since that airport, they were happy tears. I finally had a real name, a real home, real parents who chose me, not because the state paid them, but because they wanted me. The plastic bag went in the trash that night. I wouldn't need it anymore. Robert Hartman was nothing like the foster fathers I'd known. He was a successful tech entrepreneur who'd built his company from scratch, but he never made me feel like work was more important than I was. Our Saturday mornings became sacred, spent in his home office, where he taught me basic coding while explaining how computers think. Logic is your friend, he'd say, showing me how to break complex problems into smaller pieces. Just like life, one step at a time. Grace had been a teacher before chronic illness forced her to retire early, and she poured all her unused lesson plans into homeschooling me until I was ready for regular school. Those first years weren't easy. I'd wake up screaming, convinced I was back in the airport, counting planes that never brought my parents back. Grace would hold me until the shaking stopped, whispering promises that she and Robert weren't going anywhere. Therapy helped, though. I went through 3 therapists before finding Dr. Morrison, who understood that abandoned children need more than just talking. She taught me to channel my fear into focus, my anger into achievement. School became my sanctuary, each perfect grade proof that I was worth keeping. By middle school, I was thriving. Honor roll, student council, debate team, anything that kept me busy and proved my worth. Robert never missed a debate tournament, sitting in the front row with his proud smile. Grace drove me to every activity, her car stocked with snacks and encouragement. When I won the state science fair with a project on encryption algorithms Robert had helped me understand, they took me to dinner at the fanciest restaurant in town. "Our daughter the genius," Robert toasted, and I glowed under their pride. High school brought new challenges and a full scholarship offer to NYU for computer science. The night I got the acceptance letter, Robert cried. "I knew you were special the day Grace dragged me to meet you," he said. "But this is all you, kiddo." We spent the summer before college visiting New York, Robert showing me his old haunts from his startup days while Grace planned care packages and dorm room decorations. They converted my bedroom into a study space for when I'd visit, but kept all my childhood things exactly where I'd left them. College opened new worlds, but Sunday video calls with Robert and Grace anchored me home. I made friends who didn't know my history, dated boys who saw me as whole rather than damaged. Junior year changed everything. Grace's fatigue wasn't just age, the doctors said. Stage 3, ovarian cancer, aggressive and advanced. I wanted to drop out, come home, be there for every treatment. Grace wouldn't hear of it. "You finish what you started," she said. "That's what Hartmans do." I flew home every weekend, studying for exams in hospital waiting rooms, holding Grace's hand through chemotherapy. Robert aged 10 years in 10 months, his hair going gray as he watched his wife fade. But Grace faced death like she'd faced life, with stubborn grace and terrible jokes. "At least I'll never have to worry about going gray," she'd say, adjusting her wig. The end came during my senior finals. Robert called at 3 a.m., his voice breaking. "She's asking for you." I made it just in time to hold her hand, to tell her I loved her, to promise I'd take care of Robert. "You already have," she whispered. "Just by being you." The funeral was a blur of flowers and sympathy cards. Robert and I clung to each other, 2 survivors in a suddenly smaller family. That summer after graduation, instead of starting my dream job immediately, I moved back home. Robert and I learned to navigate grief together, Sunday dinners replacing Sunday calls. He taught me Grace's recipes badly, at first improving with practice. She'd laugh at us, he'd say, scraping burned lasagna into the trash. But she'd be proud we're trying. My career in tech started that fall. Robert driving me to my first day like I was starting kindergarten again. He became my sounding board for work problems, my cheerleader for promotions, my safe harbor when startup life got overwhelming. We developed new traditions, hiking trails. Grace had loved visiting her grave monthly with fresh flowers. Blake, Robert's nephew, started joining family dinners, initially supportive in our grief. But something shifted when Robert updated his will, making me primary beneficiary. Blake's comments turned sharp, questioning my place in the family. "She played you both perfectly," I overheard him telling his mother. "Abandoned kid act works every time." Robert shut him down hard, but the seed of doubt was planted in the extended family. I was no longer the miracle adoption story. In Blake's bitter narrative, I was the calculating opportunist who'd manipulated a grieving couple. The first betrayal of my new life had begun. My career at Technova took off faster than I'd dreamed. Within 3 years, I'd moved from junior developer to leading our encryption team, the algorithms Robert had taught me as a child, now protecting millions of users' data. Every promotion, every breakthrough, I'd call Robert first. Grace would be so proud, he'd always say, and I'd hear the smile in his voice. Our Sunday dinners became my anchor, the one constant as friends moved away and relationships ended. We'd cook together badly still and talk about everything from quantum computing to whether Grace would have liked the new Netflix series we were watching. Robert never acted his age. At 68, he still ran 5 miles every morning, still worked full days at his company, still beat me at chess more often than not. That Tuesday started like any other. I was in a meeting when my assistant knocked face pale. "It's your father," she said, and I knew from her expression. Robert had collapsed in his office, massive heart attack, paramedics couldn't revive him. By the time I reached the hospital, he was gone. The last text he'd sent me was a photo of his lunch with the caption, "I didn't burn it this time." The funeral felt like drowning in reverse. Instead of Grace's quiet ceremony, hundreds came to honor Robert Hartman, tech pioneer, philanthropist, beloved mentor. I spoke about the man who'd chosen to be my father, who'd taught me that family was about showing up day after day, year after year. Blake sat in the back texting through my eulogy. The extended family offered condolences that felt hollow, their eyes already calculating what Robert might have left them. I wanted to scream that I'd trade every penny just to have one more burned lasagna dinner. Mr. Garrett, Robert's lawyer and longtime friend, called 3 days after the funeral. He updated everything after Grace passed. He explained sliding documents across his mahogany desk. He wanted to make sure you were protected. The numbers didn't make sense at first. $5.5 million, the house stakes in several startups he'd mentored. "There are some smaller bequests to extended family," Garrett continued, "but Robert was very clear. You're his daughter. This is what parents do for their children." I signed where he pointed, numb to everything but the absence of the two people who'd shown me what love looked like. Blake's reaction was swift and vicious. He cornered me at the house while I was packing Robert's office. "You think you're so clever," he snarled, breath hot with whiskey. "Poor little orphan Susie, worming your way into their hearts. They had a real family before you came along." I reminded him that Grace and Robert chose me, that I'd never asked for anything beyond their love. Love. He laughed ugly and sharp. "You saw an opportunity and took it. Well, I've got news for you. Blood matters. Real family matters. And you're neither." The next morning, Garrett called with concern in his voice. "Blake's been asking questions about the will, about grounds for contesting it. He's also hired a private investigator." My stomach turned. What was there to investigate? My life was an open book, foster care records, adoption papers, everything legal and documented. "He's looking for something, anything to prove undue influence," Garrett explained. "Robert warned me this might happen. He knew Blake had been stealing from the company, small amounts but consistent. We have proof if we need it. But I didn't want war with Robert's family. I just wanted to grieve in peace." 2 weeks passed in a blur of paperwork and memories. I returned to work, threw myself into projects, tried to honor Robert and Grace by living the life they'd wanted for me. Then Patricia Chen called. The private investigator Blake hired was thorough. She explained, her voice professionally neutral. "He's tracked down your biological parents. They're living in Florida, running a restaurant." My world tilted. 23 years of nothing, and now they surfaced like oil on water. I thought you should know, Patricia continued, because they've been in contact with your cousin Blake. The house felt different that night, shadows longer, silence heavier. I sat in Robert's office, surrounded by his books and the coding manuals we'd worked through together. On his desk, a photo from my college graduation, the three of us squinting in bright sun. Grace's hand on my shoulder, Robert's arm around us both. They'd given me everything asked for, nothing in return, except that I live well and fully. Now Blake wanted to strip it all away, and he'd found the perfect weapons, the two people whose abandonment started everything. I poured a glass of Robert's good scotch and waited. Some part of me, the 5-year-old still counting planes, had always known they'd come back. I just never imagined it would be for money that wasn't even theirs to claim. The doorbell rang on a Thursday evening, 3 weeks after Robert's funeral. I'd been debugging code, lost in the logical world where problems had solutions, and nothing abandoned you, when the sound jarred me back to reality. Through the peephole, I saw two people who looked like aged photographs of a nightmare I'd tried to forget. Rachel's red lipstick had faded to mauve, her blonde hair now silver-streaked and styled in an expensive cut. Dennis stood behind her shoulders, hunched in a designer suit that didn't quite fit, eyes darting like he was still looking for exits. My hands shook as I opened the door. "Susie, baby," Rachel breathed, reaching for me with manicured nails. I stepped back, the word baby hitting like shrapnel. She'd forfeited the right to call me that 23 years ago in an airport gift shop. "We've been looking for you for so long," she continued, tears that seemed practiced rolling down her cheeks. Dennis nodded eagerly, playing his part in whatever script they'd rehearsed. "There was a terrible misunderstanding," he added. "We never meant to leave you. We've regretted it every day since." I found my voice surprised by how steady it sounded. "A misunderstanding. You boarded a plane to Mexico while I counted airplanes." Rachel's face cycled through expressions like she was choosing a mask. Confusion, hurt, then settling on maternal concern. "Is that what they told you?" "Oh, honey, we had car trouble. We were rushing back when security said you'd been taken. By then, child services wouldn't tell us where you were." The lie was so smooth I almost admired it. Then Dennis, less practiced in deception, blurted, "We had immigration issues. Couldn't come back right away." Rachel shot him a look that could strip paint. They invited themselves in, surveying Robert's house with calculating eyes. Every painting, every piece of furniture seemed to get mentally cataloged and priced. "You've done well for yourself," Rachel noted, running her fingers along the marble countertop. "The Hartmans must have been very generous." There it was, the first probe for information about money. I offered them nothing but water, watching them shift their story like a deck of cards. First, they'd been young and scared. Then financial troubles forced their hand. Next, they'd been threatened by unnamed dangerous people. Finally, they settled on a version where they'd planned to come back, but were prevented by circumstances beyond their control. "We know about your father," Rachel said, and the way she said father made me sick. "Robert Hartman, we're so sorry for your loss." Dennis pulled out his phone, showing me news articles about Robert's death, his company's success, the tech pioneer who'd changed encryption standards. They'd done their homework. "As your biological parents," Dennis started, and I cut him off. "You stopped being my parents the moment you walked away." But they were ready, for anger had probably expected it. Rachel cried prettier this time, dabbing eyes that stayed remarkably unmudged. The real reason for their visit came 45 minutes into their performance. "We're not here to disrupt your life," Rachel assured me, though disruption radiated from them like heat. "We just want to reconnect with our daughter, although—" She paused, letting Dennis take over the uglier part. "We've been struggling. The restaurant barely breaks even. Medical bills." He pulled out papers, bills with intimidating numbers. "If Robert left you well provided for, maybe you could help your real parents. Family helps family." I showed them out with promises to think about their request. The moment the door closed, I vomited my body, rejecting their presence like poison. They'd left a business card, Chen's Asian Fusion, with a Miami address, Rachel and Dennis Chen proprietors. Even their names were lies. My phone rang before I could process anything. Blake's number. Heard you had visitors, he said, satisfaction dripping through the connection. Touching reunion, I bet. Did they tell you about their rights as biological parents? Legal rights that were never properly terminated. The next morning, leaked headlines screamed across my phone. Tech heiress denies desperate parents' share of fortune. The article, clearly fed by Blake or the Chens, painted me as a cold, ungrateful daughter hoarding millions, while my biological parents struggled in poverty. My work email filled with interview requests. HR called suggesting I take some time off while things settled down. Neighbors stared when I collected mail. Someone had given reporters my address and news vans lined our quiet street. Robert's house, my sanctuary, became a fortress I couldn't leave. Natalie found me through Facebook, a name I barely remembered from foster home number 2. Her message seemed supportive at first, offering to share positive memories for any story I wanted to tell. Desperate for allies, I called her. We chatted about the Davidsons, about survival strategies in foster care. Then she mentioned she'd been contacted by a reporter, someone wanting background about my childhood. I told them you were always clever, she said. How you knew exactly what to say to get adopted. The words were wrong, the implication worse. When I pushed back, she got defensive. I'm just saying you were smart about it. Picked the rich couple without kids. I hung up, but the damage was done. 3 days later, her interview aired, carefully edited to make childhood survival skills sound like calculated manipulation. The check stub Blake's investigator photographed showed $10,000 deposited to Natalie's account the day after filming. Leonard Cross looked like a vulture in a $1,000 suit, all sharp angles and predatory patience. He sat across from me in the mediation room, representing my biological parents, with the kind of aggressive competence money could buy. Beside me, Margaret Chen, no relation to my parents' assumed name, thankfully reviewed her notes with calm precision. I'd hired her on Garrett's recommendation, told she was the best family law attorney in the state. They're claiming abandonment was never legally formalized, she'd explained in our first meeting. It's nonsense, but Cross is good at making nonsense sound reasonable. The first bombshell came quickly. Cross produced documents suggesting my parents had tried to reclaim me within weeks of the airport incident. Letters to CPS returned undelivered, he announced, sliding photocopies across the table. Margaret examined them with a poker face, but I could see her jaw tighten. The letters were dated correctly, looked official, but something felt wrong about the paper, too clean, too crisp for 23-year-old documents. We'll need to authenticate these, Margaret stated. Cross smiled like that's exactly what he wanted to hear. Dennis and Rachel played their parts perfectly. Rachel wept through her depositions, spinning tales of young parents overwhelmed by financial crisis. We thought she'd be safer with authorities temporarily, she sobbed. Just until we could get back on our feet. We never imagined they'd hide her from us. Dennis backed her up with dates and details that almost made sense if you didn't look too close. They'd been detained at the Mexican border, he claimed. Immigration issues that took years to resolve. By then, sealed adoption records made finding me impossible. We hired investigators, he insisted. Spent everything we had trying to find our baby girl. Margaret's counter-investigation revealed the truth was uglier than even I'd imagined. The Chens, their real name was actually Morrison. Before they changed it, had a pattern. 3 other children abandoned in different states over 12 years. Each time in public places, airports, bus stations, hospitals where the children would be quickly found and enter the system. Each time they'd disappear for years, then resurface when the children were adopted by wealthy families. 2 previous attempts at reclaiming parental rights had failed, but they'd extracted settlements from families wanting to avoid publicity. I was their 4th attempt, their biggest potential payoff. My home became a crime scene on a Tuesday night. I'd been staying with friends, paranoid about the media attention, when the security company called. Someone had broken in, bypassed the alarm with professional skill. Nothing valuable taken, but every photo of Robert and Grace was destroyed, faces cut out with surgical precision. Robert's office was ransacked, papers scattered, his computer wiped. The message was clear: erase the Hartmans, erase my claim to their legacy. Police found no fingerprints, no DNA, just destruction and violated memories. The detective suggested it looked personal rather than professional. Someone wanted to hurt you, not rob you, he said, as if I hadn't figured that out from my adoptive parents' mutilated photos. The threatening messages started the same week. Emails from untraceable accounts. Give us what we deserve or lose everything. Voicemails breathing heavily, then whispering, ungrateful daughter, before disconnecting. Someone spray-painted thief across Robert's grave marker, the groundskeeper calling me in tears. Rachel and Dennis publicly denounced the vandalism while their lawyer suggested stress was making me paranoid. Then photographers caught them at the cemetery, Rachel draped across Robert's headstone in performative grief. He was almost our father too, the caption read. If only we'd been given the chance. The social media campaign felt coordinated, professional. Hashtags like Justice for Bioparents and hashtag Stolen Inheritance trended overnight. Old photos of young Rachel and Dennis surfaced looking wholesome and struggling. Fake accounts shared stories of other adopted children reconnecting with biological parents, painting me as uniquely cruel for rejecting mine. Marcus Webb, whom I'd dated briefly in college, gave an interview claiming I'd bragged about my meal ticket adoptive parents. When I called him furious and hurt, he was drunk enough to admit the truth. They offered 50 grand, he slurred. I needed the money. You understand, right? It's nothing personal. Everything was personal when it came to family. But sometimes angels appear in unexpected forms. James Wheeler, the airport security guard who'd found me 23 years ago, had followed the news coverage with growing anger. Now retired and living in Queens, he'd kept something he wasn't supposed to: the original report from that night, his personal copy with notes the official version had omitted. I knew something was wrong. He told me over coffee, his hands still steady despite his 70 years. Your parents, they weren't panicked. I've seen plenty of parents who lose kids in that airport. These two were calm, kept checking their watches like they had a schedule to keep. His notes included details about their behavior: how they'd walked past me twice without acknowledging I was their child, how they'd calmly proceeded through security while I sat 30 feet away. He'd even noted the gate number for their Mexico flight. I'll testify, he promised. That little girl deserved better then, and she deserves better now. The FBI entered our case through a side door nobody expected. Agent Sarah Coleman sat across from Margaret and me, her badge reflecting fluorescent light as she spread files across the conference table. Your case connected dots we've been tracking for years, she explained. The Morrison family, aka the Chens, aka half a dozen other names. Interstate fraud, child abandonment, extortion. Your parents, she said the word like it tasted bad, are professionals at this. The files painted a picture of calculated cruelty. Phoenix, 1998. A boy left at a mall. Seattle, 2001. Twin girls at a ferry terminal. Each child carefully chosen, young enough to be adoptable, old enough to remember abandonment. Each surfacing attempt timed to maximum emotional and financial vulnerability of the adoptive families. Margaret worked with the FBI to build our defense while Cross escalated his attacks. He filed motion after motion trying to freeze Robert's assets during litigation. My clients are living in poverty while their daughter hoards millions, he argued to judges who seemed increasingly skeptical. Rachel and Dennis performed their grief in court, but cracks showed. During cross-examination, their stories shifted like sand. The car trouble became engine failure, became flat tire, became stolen vehicle. The immigration issues morphed from expired visas to mistaken identity to bureaucratic error. Dennis forgot which hospital I was born at twice in one testimony. Blake's involvement came to light through a disgruntled employee at Robert's company. Janet Martinez had worked in accounting, noticed discrepancies Blake had hidden for years. Small amounts siphoned from client accounts disguised as processing fees, routed through shell companies. Mr. Hartman was going to confront him, Janet testified. The week before his heart attack, he'd asked me to prepare a full audit. The implication hung heavy in the courtroom. Blake's theft gave him motive beyond greed. If Robert had lived, Blake would have faced criminal charges. Now he wanted my inheritance to cover his tracks and fund his lifestyle. Patricia Hartman. Grace's older sister surprised everyone by appearing as a witness for my parents. I hadn't seen her since Grace's funeral, where she'd complained about the modest inheritance Grace had left her. Now she sat in the witness box dressed in black like she was still mourning, testifying about Grace and Robert's obsession with their adopted daughter. They changed after taking her in, Patricia claimed. Became secretive, distant from real family. Cross guided her through testimony designed to show undue influence, how I'd isolated the Hartmans from blood relatives. The betrayal cut deep. Grace would have been heartbroken to see her sister selling lies for money. Then Patricia made a mistake. She claimed to have visited frequently during my college years, witnessing my manipulation firsthand. But Margaret had done her homework. Credit card records, phone logs, emails all showed Patricia had visited exactly twice in 4 years, both times asking for money Robert refused to give. Under Margaret's precise questioning, Patricia crumbled. She admitted Blake had approached her, offered her $500,000 from any settlement if she testified. "I deserve something from my sister's estate," she spat, mask dropping completely. "That girl got everything while real family got scraps." The judge's expression hardened as Patricia's credibility evaporated. Everything accelerated when Agent Coleman arrested Dennis outside the courthouse. He'd tried to cash a forged check claiming to be Robert's business partner collecting an old debt. The signature was laughably bad, but the attempt showed desperation. Rachel threw him under the bus, immediately claiming she knew nothing about his schemes. "I just wanted my daughter back," she wailed to reporters. But the FBI had been recording their calls, Rachel coaching Dennis on exactly which banks to target, which lies to tell. Their restaurant in Florida didn't exist, just a paper corporation for laundering money from their previous schemes. David Chen, again no relation, had been Robert's best friend and business partner since the beginning. He'd stayed quiet during the initial drama, respecting my privacy while gathering his own evidence. When he finally testified, he brought something nobody expected: video messages Robert had recorded for future milestones. For Susie's wedding. Robert's face filled the screen, healthy and smiling just months before his death. "I know I talk too much at family dinners, so I'm recording this now while I can stick to the script," Grace wrote. "He spoke about finding me, choosing me, loving me as completely as any biological child. People might question why we left you everything," he said, looking directly at the camera. "Let me be clear. You're our daughter. You were from the moment Grace saw your purple sky. Biology doesn't make family. Love does. Presence does. Choosing each other every day does." There were more videos. For my 30th birthday, the birth of hypothetical grandchildren, retirement. Each one reinforced the same message: I was their daughter, their chosen family, their legacy. David had helped Robert record them after Grace's death, when mortality felt closer. "He knew Blake might cause trouble," David explained. "He wanted you protected, not just financially but emotionally. He wanted you to never doubt you were loved." The courtroom was silent except for Rachel's harsh breathing. Even Cross seemed affected, shuffling papers without purpose. The judge called a recess, but everyone knew the case had shifted. Truth has a weight that lies can't match, and Robert's love preserved in digital amber outweighed every false claim and manufactured emotion. Judge Martinez delivered her verdict on a gray Thursday that felt like sunshine. Her voice rang clear through the courtroom as she systematically dismantled every claim my biological parents had made. "The evidence shows a pattern of deliberate abandonment and attempted extortion," she stated. "The court finds no grounds for overturning the legal adoption or challenging the inheritance." But she went further, recommending criminal prosecution for fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. Blake's face went white as she mentioned his financial crimes evidence that would be forwarded to the district attorney. Dennis and Rachel sat frozen, their lawyer already packing his briefcase, distancing himself from clients whose checks would likely bounce. The aftermath came swiftly. Federal marshals arrested Rachel and Dennis at their motel, finding fake IDs and plane tickets to Costa Rica. Blake tried to run but was caught at the Canadian border with 200,000 in stolen company funds. Patricia slunk away, publicly disowned by the remaining Hartman relatives, who finally saw her greed clearly. The media circus reversed course, painting me as a survivor rather than a villain. I declined every interview request. Grace and Robert had taught me that dignity meant staying silent when others expected drama. Creating the Hartman Foundation felt like breathing again after months underwater. With Garrett's help, I structured it to provide full scholarships and support for abandoned and foster children. Not just tuition, but therapy, mentorship, the whole scaffolding of care that helps wounded kids become whole adults. James Wheeler agreed to serve on the board, bringing decades of experience spotting children in crisis. "Every kid deserves what you got," he said at our first meeting. "A real chance." We funded 10 scholarships the first year, each recipient getting not just money, but a network of support adults who chose to show up consistently. I returned to work, gradually, my colleagues treating me with careful normalness that slowly became genuine. My encryption work took on new meaning, creating security for others while rebuilding my own sense of safety. The house felt different without constant threat. I reframed Robert and Grace's photos, hung new ones from happier times. Sunday dinners resumed, though now I invited friends who'd stood by me through the circus. We cooked Robert's recipes badly, laughed at our failures, and slowly filled the silence with new memories. The grief never left, but it softened, became bearable. Therapy helped process everything, not just the trial, but the original abandonment it had resurrected. Dr. Morrison, who'd guided me through childhood trauma, came out of retirement to help again. "You survived it twice," she noted. "First the abandonment, then the attempt to weaponize it against you." We worked through anger that felt bottomless, the fury at parents who saw me as a meal ticket, relatives who chose money over truth, systems that let children disappear into gift shops and foster care. But we also processed survivor's guilt. Why did I get the Hartmans when so many kids got nothing? Why did Robert's love and money make me a target, instead of just letting me grieve? Letters arrived from other abandoned children, now adults, sharing their stories. Some had found families like mine, others hadn't, but all understood the particular grief of being chosen to be left behind. I answered each one, building an unexpected network of people who got it. The foundation's first scholarship recipient, Maria, had been left at a fire station at age 3. She wrote me updates from college, determined to become a social worker. "Someone saved me," she explained. "Now I save others." That's what Grace and Robert had done, saved me, though they'd always insisted it was mutual. 6 months after the trial, I visited Dennis and Rachel in federal prison. They'd been convicted of fraud and sentenced to 5 years each. I needed to see them without performance, without lawyers and lies. Rachel looked older without her armor of makeup and manipulation. Dennis seemed smaller, deflated. "Why?" I asked, the only question that mattered. They looked at each other, 23 years of partnership in crime, weighing between them. "We were broke," Dennis finally said. "You were accident. Keeping you meant staying broke." Rachel added, "We figured someone rich would want you. Pretty little girl, smart. It was business." There it was, truth as ugly as I'd imagined. I wasn't abandoned for my safety or their struggle. I was merchandise that needed better packaging. I left the prison feeling lighter, mysteries solved, ghosts laid to rest. That weekend, I drove to Grace and Robert's graves with fresh flowers and good news. The foundation had placed its 20th child. The company was thriving with ethical leadership, and I was learning to cook without burning everything. "You gave me everything," I told their headstones. "Not the money, though, that helps others now. You gave me proof that love exists, that some people stay, that family is about choice, not chance." Wind rustled through cemetery trees like applause or agreement. Life settled into new rhythms. Work foundation meetings, cooking classes where I finally mastered Grace's lasagna. I dated carefully, slowly, looking for someone who understood that trust was earned in small moments, daily choices to show up. The house became a gathering place for former foster kids, weekend dinners that echoed the warmth Robert and Grace had created. We formed our own family chosen and choosing held together by understanding rather than blood. The doorbell no longer made me freeze. Planes overhead were just planes, not symbols of abandonment. Looking back, I see the strange gifts wrapped in terrible paper. Being abandoned taught me to recognize real love when the Hartmans offered it. The trial revealed who truly stood by me. Losing everything twice showed me what actually mattered. Money can be stolen or sued for, but love, real love that shows up day after day, year after year, that's untouchable. They gave me up for nothing, those strangers who shared my DNA. Robert and Grace gave everything, and asked only that I pay it forward. Every scholarship granted, every foster kid mentored, every choice to trust. Despite the scars, that's my inheritance. The 5.5 million just makes it easier to share. The last video David gave me was dated a week before Robert's heart attack. He's in the garden, Grace loved morning sun catching silver hair. "If you're watching this, something's happened to me," he says. "I need you to know that you and Grace were my life's greatest accomplishment. Not the company or the code or the money. You, the daughter we chose who chose us back. Live well, Susie. Love deeply despite the hurt. Trust carefully but completely. Build the family you deserve. And remember, we loved you from purple skies to forever." The frame freezes on his smile, and I see myself reflected in the screen. Survivor, daughter, heir to more than money. Loved, chosen, whole. What would you do if your birth parents abandoned you for money they never had, then returned decades later demanding money that was never theirs? How do you think we measure the value of family in blood, in presence, or in the daily choice to love? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences with chosen family in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about resilience, redemption, and the families we build from the ashes of the ones we lose. Share this with someone who needs to remember that family isn't just about DNA. It's about who shows up when life falls apart. Thank you for listening to my journey. May you find the love that stays, the family that chooses you, and the strength to know the difference.